Israel does not discriminate in its bombing of Gaza. Men, women, children. Hospitals, mosques, churches. But their attacks in the last few months do seem to be showing a preference. Schools. Last week, at least 4 people were killed and 18 were injured as a result of an Israeli strike on the Saladin school in Gaza City. But that wasn't the first school attack this month. It was the 9th, with one of those attacks killing more than 100 people. And this isn't uncommon for the most moral army in the world that has bombed more than 500 schools since the war began, many of them run by the same organization, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA. Since the start of the war, 70% of UNRWA's schools in Gaza have been hit, 539 people sheltering in them have been killed, and more than 289 aid workers, 207 of whom worked for UNRWA, have also lost their lives to Israeli bombardment. Now, Israel's attacks on UNRWA aren't limited to its staff or its infrastructure or the people they shelter. Israel also attacks UNRWA's credibility again and again. In January, the Israeli government alleged that 12 out of UNRWA's 13,000 staff members in Gaza participated in the October the 7th attack. And despite providing little to no proof, the allegations prompted 16 UN member states to cut their funding to the main relief agency for 2 million people living in the Gaza Strip during an ongoing genocide. 7 months later, Israel is still adding names to that list. Its Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent UNRWA's chief, Philippe Lazzarini, the names of 108 UNRWA employees it alleges to be working as quote-unquote terrorist operatives, and demanded that those employees be terminated immediately. The Israeli government even adds that plenty more names from UNRWA will be shared in the future. Joining me to discuss Israel's accusations and the humanitarian crisis they are causing in Gaza is UNRWA's Commissioner General, Philippe Lazzarini. Philippe Lazzarini, thank you for joining me on Mehdi Unfiltered. Before we get into all of this, I want to ask you about the current humanitarian situation in Gaza. You commented on last week's attacks on one of UNRWA's schools by tweeting, "Gaza is no place for children anymore." How bad have things gotten as we approach the 1-year mark for this ugly war?
Well, I believe Gaza is just becoming unlivable. I mean, you heard since last week that there have been, again, a new number of evacuation order. Basically, people are just pinballs. They are moved from one place to the other one, depending on the advancement of the military operation. And basically, in Gaza, people are just daily facing either death or disease or hunger. I don't know how much worse it can become. I have to say we are losing and we are lacking words to describe the situation. In the past, I many times said that Gaza is a war of all the superlative. When you look at the level of destruction, number of people having been killed, the number of people being moved, the artificial hunger which has also been created there, and now you look at the disease spreading in the Gaza Strip.
And the UN Secretary General released a statement last week on the polio outbreak in Gaza that threatens the lives, the health of more than 640,000 children under the age of 10 there. He said that without a ceasefire, or at least a pause in the fighting, a successful vaccination campaign is impossible. How do you vaccinate 600,000 children while Israeli bombs are falling?
Well, as the Secretary General said, we need a humanitarian pause. We need a vaccination, a polio pause, to make sure that we can cover all the children under the age of 10. Otherwise, as you said, it will be extraordinarily challenging to reach them out, and that would also mean to take the risk to fail our campaign, and that would be a disaster, not only for the people in Gaza, but as you know, this is a communicable disease which doesn't know any border and could also spread in the entire region, including in Israel.
You haven't been allowed into Gaza for several months now by the Israelis. Why do you think that is?
I've been allowed to go to Gaza since January, and I do not have a visa to go to my headquarters in Jerusalem since the end of June. I believe that one of the reasons behind this is to put pressure on the agency. You know that there are a lot of calls from the Israeli authorities to dismantle UNRWA, and this is certainly one way to put also pressure on the organization.
Philippe Lazzarini, last month, Israel accused 108 of your staff members at UNRWA of being, quote, terrorist operatives. What does that mean exactly, and what evidence, if any, did they present to you?
Well, Mehdi, as you know, already in January, we had 12 staff who have been accused to participate to the October 7 massacre. Since we had an internal investigation conducted by an independent body of the United Nations, which concluded its work at the end of July, for which basically half of the people have been proven without evidence, and other people, basically it was said that if we would be in a situation to corroborate and authentify the information, we might be in a situation where they might have participated to the October 7. Regarding the list of the 100, this is one allegation among others. We take them all very seriously, and basically we are asking the Israeli authorities to share information with the organization in order to assess if yes or not we can undertake an investigation.
Were you aware that Israel was gathering this new list, that they were planning to share it the same week as your pledging conference for funds in New York? Do you think the timing was intentional, perhaps, to try and undermine your organization?
Well, I do believe that there are a lot of coordinated action. Most of the time when the agency has a donor conference, we have a new allegation being made public. But the one you are referring to basically came out already in February, if I remember well, at the Munich Security Conference. There was a full dossier being distributed by the member states talking about basically list of staff allegedly being a member of the Hamas or the Jihad, or list of staff having sympathy. But since then, nothing more has been shared.
Last week, the Wall Street Journal published a letter from UNRWA responding to Israel's allegations from earlier this year, the ones you mentioned, accusing first 12 UNRWA employees, then 7 more, a total of 19, of participating in the October 7th Hamas attack. The UNRWA letter from your organization said, quote, the Commissioner General of UNRWA terminated the contracts of employees despite the lack of evidence. He did it to protect the agency's ability to deliver humanitarian assistance in Gaza and elsewhere. Looking back, Philippe Lazzarini, do you still stand by your decision to terminate the contracts of 10 aid workers on the UNRWA payroll in Gaza when you didn't have any evidence given to you by the Israelis at the time? Your critics would say that just made UNRWA look more guilty than innocent.
I would disagree, and we have been under heavy critics because of the lack of due diligence, and my response at that time was we will undertake due diligence, but a reverse due diligence. It was in the interest of the agency at that time to terminate the contract of the staff allegedly having participated to the October 7 attack. The allegations were so horrible, and if that would have been the case, would constitute such a betrayal to the Palestinians in general, but also to the agency, that I had no other choice than to take such a bold decision. But in parallel, the Secretary General has initiated an investigation on this allegation, and in parallel, we have also commissioned a total review of the risk management system of the agency, which is a famous report which has been delivered by the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Catherine Colonna.
I believe that independent review that you mentioned found that 10 of the 19 staffers accused by Israel between January and April were cleared due to the absence or the lack of evidence against them. Have any of them been re-employed by UNRWA since?
Well, they have been cleared on this allegation, but we still have the allegation that they might be member of the armed group. And before taking a final determination, we need also to look into this, because as you know, United Nations policies are very clear. You cannot be a member of UNRWA and at the same time being a member of an armed group.
The review you mentioned from April also found that Israel didn't express Any concerns around any UNRWA staff going back to 2011? These are all very belated concerns that the Israelis are raising. But the review did outline several recommendations to address the topic of neutrality within your organization. One of the issues they raised, and which a lot of people, a lot of reports, as you know, have raised in the past, is the issue of the textbooks in UNRWA schools in Gaza, which are not just considered to be biased, but have been accused of inciting violence, of glorifying martyrdom. Do you accept that's an issue? And if so, what steps are you taking to address that?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of our education system here in the region. As you know, we have more than 500,000 girls and boys attending our school across the region. We are the only one in the region having a proper human rights curriculum. We are teaching tolerance in our school, and we have also reached gender parity before anyone else here in the region. Now, as you know also, we are living in a region deeply divided, where emotions are very high. And basically, we have an Israeli narrative and a Palestinian narrative. And obviously, as UN and UNRWA, we cannot overcome these two narratives in the absence of a political solution. So meanwhile, it is true that there are issues in the textbook, which, by the way, are curriculum from the Palestinian authorities, for which stories are told through the Palestinian narrative, contested by the Israeli. But fortunately, as a United Nations organization, we have the narrative of the international community and the United Nations. And this is what is being taught in our schools.
And on the subject of those schools, Israel has bombed a lot of those schools, including last week, killing a lot of families, sheltering within them, kids there. How shocked have you been to see how casually Israel and the United States, which is backing Israel, has disregarded international humanitarian law when it comes to protected sites like schools?
I expressed myself many times. It's absolutely shocking, this routine, blatant disregard of the United Nations, of the international humanitarian law. If you look at Gaza, the number of UN staff being killed, the number of premises having been destroyed, the number of people killed while in these premises, the number of convoys being targeted. There is a routine, blatant disregard of the humanitarian organization and of IHL. But beyond that, we have also the political attack against the agency, the call for the dismantlement of the agency, the legislative effort at the Knesset to label the organization as a terrorist organization. And this would be absolutely unbelievable. A UN member state labeling a UN organization as a terrorist organization, an organization having a mandate from all the other member states, member of the General Assembly. This would be absolutely unprecedented. But let's do no mistake. It's not just an attack on UNRWA, it's an attack on the broader UN system, it's an attack on the multilateral system, it's an attack on all those who are promoting a different narrative, all those supporting, in fact, the political path of a two-state solution here in the region.
You mentioned the attempt to label UNRWA a terrorist organization. At least 3 bills are in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, aiming to shut down your organization in Israel as a terrorist group. To your knowledge, does Israel have an alternative for UNRWA if those bills were to pass, if they succeeded in shutting you down? If UNRWA didn't exist, what would be happening to the Palestinians in Gaza right now? What is the alternative?
Well, the real question is, who would take over, for example, the education of the girls and boys deeply traumatized, living in the rubble in Gaza today? We talk about 600,000 girls and boys from the primary and secondary school age. There is no one else beside UNRWA except a functioning government, functioning administration, which can provide education at scale to such a number of children. Now, the more we wait, the more we will be sowing the seeds for more hatred, revenge, and violence in the future. So no, I do not see who else can step in and take over the activities of the agency.
Philippe Lazzarini, I think it was 16 countries that cut funding to your organization when Israel made those accusations against your staffers back in January. All of them have resumed their funding, I believe, except the United States. What is your message to President Biden and to Vice President Kamala Harris, who is currently running to succeed him?
Well, the United States has been a long-standing partner of the agency, has been until now the first financial provider to the agency, and I really hope that in the absence of a political solution, support to UNRWA will continue, because otherwise it will be perceived by the Palestinian as a disinterest or an international community turning its back to a proper, lasting political solution.
Do you agree with the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, who, like many humanitarian aid agencies, has accused Israel of blocking aid going into Gaza? He's also said Israel is using starvation as a method of war.
Well, clearly the assistance is not commensurate to the need. We are daily struggling to bring assistance into the Gaza Strip, and I have been on record more than once. We have been in a situation where hunger has been created artificially in the Gaza Strip. This is a region which, before this war, never really encountered hunger, except in a war situation or in situation where a siege was imposed on the Strip.
You say hunger has been artificially created. At the start of this interview, you said Israel has made Gaza unlivable. Is what we are seeing in Gaza, then, in your view, a genocide?
Well, this will leave the ICC and the ICG to determine the qualification of what happened. But what I can say is that there have been unprecedented suffering inflicted to the population. As I said, this has been the war of all the superlative. Look at the number of people killed, the number of children killed, the level of displacement, constant displacement, the hunger, the disease.
Philippe Lazzarini, if it's not genocide, do you agree that attacking UNRWA schools is a war crime?
I do believe we need an investigation, and indeed it would constitute as a war crime. I am not the legal or the judge who will label it as war crime, but I do believe that this blatant violation of IHL might constitute a war crime.
Philippe Lazzarini, prior to heading up UNRWA in 2020, you worked, I believe, at the Red Cross, at the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, at the UN Development Programme. You've spent decades in this field, in conflict zones around the world. How does Gaza compare to all the other humanitarian nightmares you've covered, you've had to tackle?
Well, first of all, it's a war taking place in an area where people are nowhere to flee, and this is quite exceptional. There is no border to cross, and people are constantly on the move. Traditionally, when you are in a conflict situation, you might be pushed once, moved once or twice, you cross a border, but you are settled until the end of the war. This has not been the case in Gaza. If you listen to the people observe, people have been displaced 15 up to 20 times. They have absolutely nowhere to go. But the other element which strikes me is the absence of international media. How is it possible after 10 months to be in such a highly mediatized context that international media are not allowed to see by themselves what is really going on? And that means in this world there is also a very strong element of propaganda.
It's a good point you make about propaganda and about the lack of international media, and even though there are many brave Palestinian journalists reporting on the ground getting killed doing so. Obviously, one of the big claims against UNRWA, aside from the fact that some of your staffers may have taken part in October the 7th, even though the evidence hasn't really been provided, The other claim the Israelis make is that Hamas are hiding under your schools, that they've built tunnels under your schools, under your refugee camps, under your office buildings. They also claim that you knew about it. What is your response to that claim?
First of all, whenever we had a suspicion in the past that there might be a tunnel nearby a premise of the agencies, we systematically, constantly informed both the de facto authority in Gaza, being the Hamas, but also the Kogat, being the Israeli authority. So we have been always extremely transparent in whatever we were able to observe or to witness. Secondly, I mean, as a human development organization or humanitarian organization, I do not have the military expertise to look at what's underneath the entire Gaza Strip. And we have obviously discovered or heard about tens, if not hundreds of kilometers of a tunnel in Gaza. Very few underneath, if none, our school. They were always nearby, at least the allegation I have heard until now. So my point here is to say all this allegation needs to be investigated. First, we need to investigate the killing of the UN staff. We need to investigate all the damages which have been caused and people who have been killed in our premises. But we need also to investigate all this allegation. And this is the reason why I'm calling also for the setting up of a board of inquiry.
Last question, Philippe Lazzarini. You haven't been able to enter Gaza this year, as you said. When you speak to your staff on the ground in Gaza, the ones who haven't been killed, both Palestinian and non-Palestinian, what do they tell you about what life is like right now for them in Gaza at UNRWA locations that are supposedly protected?
But already the last time I went, which was in January, I was struck on how people were just living in a pilot automatic mode, and also the absence of light in their eyes. It seems the situation has gone even much worse, though it was difficult to comprehend that it could get worse. And today, when I talk to my staff, they are saying that in reality, people today are so resignated that they are just waiting for their turn to be killed in the Gaza Strip. And this is absolutely heartbreaking because people have lost faith of a possible better future.
Yes, they have. It's a tragedy. Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General of UNRWA, thank you for taking time out for Mehdi Unfiltered today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mehdi. It was my pleasure.